So, Lucy, a very quick introduction. Just tell us a little bit about Keena's Mustard and yourself, and then we will
Thanks
get the
very
ball
much, Ray.
rolling.
Thank you. Yes, so Keena's Mustard is a specialist marketing agency focusing on both marketing of market research, insights, and data companies, and also the marketing of insights themselves within large organizations like Coca-Cola, Sanofi, BIC. We've worked with a lot of big global companies, helping them get traction with their insights, with their stakeholders internally. So that's it. Hopefully that's enough clarity for you.
Brilliant. So, AI has been coming along. You have been talking about it, Lucy. How are people marketing their AI approaches, first of all? So, those companies who are using AI, what are they doing to try to make people aware of it?
I think at the moment there's a lot of talk, obviously, and it's a lot of buzz around AI. I think the shine has absolutely gone off it. I think if we'd had this conversation a year ago, things would have been very different. I think if you're not using AI now and you're working in a market research data and insight organization, you've got a problem. I was surprised at how low that response was of only 42% chat GPT and blah, blah, blah. I would have assumed it would be higher than that. But I think there is an awful lot of talk around it. I think the challenge is that people are not talking about the benefit and they're not being specific about this type of AI that they're using. And I think there are two massive issues there, because I think if you use the phrase AI, the chances are now people are just going to be turned off by a generic, oh yes, and we use that, we're AI driven. I mean, sorry, that ship has sailed. You need to think of a new way of talking about it. And I think that's really important.
That just to add on that, I've seen recently both Lubov Rushanskaya and Elaine Rodrigo talking from the client side about some suppliers coming in and saying, we've got a special advantage. What's your advantage? We use AI.
That ain't going to cut it anymore, I'm afraid. I'm amazed that
No.
people still think it would. I think the backlash was really over during this year. I think it's gone from it being, oh yes, as I say, if we'd spoken a year ago, it probably might have been exciting to talk about AI generically. Clients immediately want to know exactly what you mean by that. And if you haven't got a very clear description or explanation of how you're using it and what the benefit is for the client, then it's just table stakes. It's just a hygiene factor, and it's not going to get you anyone's attention. And in fact, most of the conversation a year ago was around the combination of humans and AI, and is AI going to take our jobs and all that kind of stuff. That has obviously moved on considerably, but I think that everybody is now aware that AI is a tool. It's like saying we do research with computers, right?
Yes. I can
Nobody would
remember
say,
when people did start saying it.
yes, exactly. Sadly, but
Yes.
the point being that you'd never go around saying, oh yes, we use computers to do market research. That's you never did. And people are making the same comments about AI now. They're talking about AI as they would have
Yeah.
done a computer about 30, 40, 50 years ago.
So what about the way that we're using AI to market insights? Are people starting to use it in the marketing of
Yes, I mean,
agencies
they
or in?
are and they aren't. I mean, I think that we've been experimenting with lots of things. In fact, we're doing a big study, just starting a pilot with a large global food manufacturing company. And we're looking at how to use AI to generate materials to share internally. And we're doing a test whereby we're going to do stuff with AI, and we're going to do stuff with, which is obviously going to involve humans. Obviously, everyone is evolved to everything, but something involving AI, seeing how much time we save and how much better it is, and something just using humans and trying to avoid using AI, which is actually very difficult, right? It's almost impossible
Yes.
to do things nowadays without using AI. So we have to sort of acknowledge that. However, having said that, in some areas, it's quite easy and simple to do a relatively impressive podcast, for example. So you can upload, to Notebook or one of those kinds of platforms, a white paper or a blog, or the sort of thing you did when you trained in your own, your virtual Ray. You can upload stuff, and then it'll come out with an incredibly impressive conversation, which just sounds exactly like like a real podcast with real people talking. Two disadvantages. One is it's entirely American, so you can't get people out, who sound like they come from anywhere other than the US, which can be a problem for some organizations. And the other thing is it does slightly get it wrong. So you're not, it's kind of frustrating, and it's quite difficult to go back in and redo it. So you have to get what you load up in the first place has to be exactly right. Like they'll get names wrong and things. It just sort of slightly misses things. But on that side, and on obviously copy and cutting, writing headlines, writing blogs, if you've got a good copywriter using ChatGPT or another AI to support that, the chances are you can come up with something a lot better, a lot quicker. If that person isn't a good copywriter, then you won't. So this kind of returns slightly to, so you need to know how to write good copy to be able to judge what ChatGPT is doing and to be able to understand what is actually worth using and what is improving and what is not. But obviously across all that gamut, it's great, and we use it continuously all the time for all sorts of things, to cut things down, to change things, to try and key and focus on the message. We can ask, cut it, editing, Tracy, brilliant, absolutely brilliant, super helpful. But obviously you absolutely need it in the hands of somebody who knows what they're doing. Otherwise it's no good at all.
So
I can give examples of things where
yes,
it's not very good.
but first of all, quick question. So in terms of your own team, are people working fewer hours or producing more stuff or producing better stuff?
I would say they're not working fewer hours, no. Inevitable. It means you're liberated to spend time doing other things, which is great. So you can probably spend a little bit more time, thinking about the strategy and the approach, or your plan, or looking at other opportunities. And you can shorten the time it takes to do things, but the process of doing that doesn't necessarily shorten the overall time of the project, for example. So, oftentimes you've got to provide a bit of copy, which somebody needs to review and think about, and then feedback on, and that time takes the same amount of time, regardless of whether or not you've used ChatGPT in the first place or not. And also, as I say, it's only good in the hands of somebody who knows what they're doing. So I've seen copy which is blatantly obvious, AI written copy, and it is, it talks rubbish, and you can't be shoving this stuff out because it really isn't helpful, and it will still hallucinate around things. So if it doesn't know the answer to something, for example, I was talking to a journalist on Monday who was saying she used it to look at who were the thought leaders in insights, and what were they good to talk about. And actually, Ray, you came up very good. And then she said, oh, well, hang on, these are all agency side people, or people not working in clients. So she said, which are the client side ones? And it convincingly came up with several very interesting sounding clients, insight clients, none of whom were real. And she was going, oh, this woman at Diageo, I must ring her up. She sounds amazing. And then she realized that she was fake. So, I think you do have to, it has to be in the hands of the right people. And I think that makes the huge difference. And it doesn't always save time. You can get a better précis, but then you still have to go through that précis, edit it, make sure it's really focused, maybe rewrite the headline a few times, to get it exactly right. So as I say, it can be advantageous, but it's not so advantageous as to be game changing yet. However, we have used it to try and generate videos, infographics, things like that. We find it very poor, very, very poor. The video is, you can try loading up the same thing you might have loaded up to do your podcast, which was, as I say, in Notebook or something, which is relatively convincing. If you try and load that up to one of the free video or even paid for video generating sites, it is worse than embarrassing. And the amount of prompts and changes that you have to keep doing to get it to evolve are probably not worth doing. You could use an open AI system like like ChatGPT-4 to create a script or a storyboard, which you could then edit, and then you could put it into the video. But that's what most of the videos are doing. But what they don't, as in the video generating systems, are doing, they're just taking it out of out of a system, getting them to do the script and then automatically doing it, but you don't get to interfere, and you need to interfere because most of the time it's awful. It's not worth doing. And we've tried to use it for things like infographics, and it's made it worse in nearly every single case. Now, that's not to say in a year's time we'll be having this conversation again, I hope, and we'll be going, oh gosh, things have moved on so fast, and now you can make convincing videos at the drop of a hat, but so much prompting doesn't save any time. You'd be better off doing it yourself. So
it wouldn't surprise me if that works in a year's time. But
yeah.
that nice segue into the last thing before we dive into the questions, which is what changes do you see in 2025? So 2024 was quite different to 2023. What might 2025 hold?
Well, I think I would be amazed if you didn't get 100% use of AI across the board. I mean, I would be amazed if that's not the case. But I think there will also be increasing recognition of it being a tool like a computer. And, it's absolutely revolutionary, as computers revolutionized us, and other massive technological improvements have revolutionized the way that we work and live. However, I think that people will be much better at understanding how to integrate it into their workflows, and they'll be much more sophisticated around what they're doing for that. And it'll be much less about AI and much more about what the AI is doing for you, and what the benefits are and how it's working. So I think that will be what happens, and it will continue to move, and it's super fast. So there is a load of stuff I can't predict because I would be guessing, but realistically, it is inevitable that it is going to move incredibly quickly, and you almost need to be trying to predict where you think it's going to go and talking about that now. So
Absolutely. So if you've got any questions for Lucy around the future marketing and all of that side of stuff, or for me on what I talked through before, type them in now. We've got a couple of questions already. The first one is definitely for me, Lucy, so I'll take that one, which is, Ray, you mentioned Python, but I missed the context. Was that for the comment themes? We're currently using Python to create machine learning themes. Is there more coming? So Python is increasingly integrated in ChatGPT. You need to make sure that every time you're doing anything quantitative, that Python is being used. And if you want to do language analysis, you want to make sure that it's not engaged. Copilot is now leveraging Python a bit. You want to see that little icon that says code if you're doing something quantitative. But they're also rolling out Python integration with Excel, which means all those masses of libraries. At the moment, it's predominantly pandas, but all the other libraries are going to become more and more integrated, which means that ChatGPT will be using, and Copilot, and presumably the others, they're using their language skills to understand what you want to do, but then they're picking a Python pre-tested tool to do the analysis. So that makes it much more robust. So let's see.
I can answer the question about the clients not explicitly not using AI, because I've had exactly the same experience. And obviously
So we'll just read it out.
Okay. Yeah, so Yanni de Kock, I received a contract this week where a client prohibits using AI unless they specifically authorize it. Is this something you've seen? Yes, absolutely. It is something I've seen. And as I say, we can easily, in our business, in marketing and in creative marketing and insights marketing, we can do that. So I just need to tell my team to remember not to use AI, which is doable. But I can imagine in research and data gathering and insight, that is going to become increasingly difficult, if not kind of, almost impossible in some cases, unless you're doing some kind of pure play qual. I mean, we're using AI in everything all the time. And maybe this client doesn't understand, or those clients don't really understand how much it is integrated already, probably in the systems they're using, if they're using Teams,
Yeah, so I think there are two strategies that you could adopt. One is sort of to play ignorant and only list and talk to that client about stuff that is obviously AI. So you're going to put it into something like ResearchWise to do an automated analysis using AI. But the other one, which is probably more the way I would go, is to create a list of all the standard tools that are AI based and say, look, I want you to sign off on all of these as part of the agreement, because I am going to use Google. I am going to use Grammarly. I am going to use SatNav to get to locations. And so all of these everyday AIs want signing off, because sometimes it's just a blanket thing. But one of the reasons clients are doing it is to make sure their data is not uploaded somewhere it can be stolen. That is a very real concern. And the second is, if we talk about something like synthetic data, they don't want to pay for 1,000 interviews and find out that 200 of them are synthetic and shouldn't really be charged at the same rate and don't have the same standard error and don't have the reliability. So I think those are the real concerns. But the problem is the person asking you to sign the contract is not the person in the business who created the request. And that can put a bit of a loop in sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, we did have exactly that situation. And I think, to your point, I think they are looking at kind of obvious AI systems. And I think they're not thinking about, as you say, you know, as I was saying, Teams, or as you say, Google or whatever. AI is integrated with all these things. But from the point of view of data protection, I mean, there are obviously systems which are safer. And I think, as you mentioned, Copilot is definitely going to be better than just whacking it on free chat GPT. But you know, and then, you know, there are obviously much more closed systems which you can use, like I mean, we work with a company called Inspirion who do large scale data integration to create a kind of first pass of your story in PowerPoint. And that's kind of, you know 30,000, 30 million, 30 whatever data points straight into your PowerPoint in a few minutes. And that's a completely closed system. So it's not a large language model, but it uses AI to set a framework to train to create your first PowerPoint. So I think that that kind of quant at scale approach will be more attractive to clients who can keep it completely separate. And they're working with a lot of big global clients at the moment who wouldn't want their data anywhere near a standard large language model, which is going to be using it for any kind of training.
So we've got a couple of comments and questions around synthetic data. One of them is, how would you overcome client resistance to using it? I wouldn't. I think there are enough clients who are interested in using augmented synthetic data. I would tell them what the benefits are and if they want to use it. And you could well do it on a project by project basis. So they tell you that they want 2 weeks worth of data collection completing in 10 days. And you'll say to them, well, we could do that if we did synthetic data. It would have this benefit and so on. And this is why we believe it would work in this case. And they will either take that or they won't take that. It's going to be faster and cheaper than the alternative. And which takes us to the other one about how compatible is synthetic data with forecasting market share, market development. Augmented synthetic data is similar in its impact on your analysis to weighting the data. So you're supposed to have 20% of the sample are young men, only 15% of the sample are young men. So can we use all the data in there to make an assessment of what 20% would have looked like instead of 15%? That's what it's doing in augmented data. That's why it tends to work in those quantitative sections. At the moment, I certainly wouldn't be trying to persuade somebody to use fully synthetic data. I think that it's way too early in the process for that. And we've got a bit of a branding problem, because augmented synthetic is a fairly well established, fairly robust. Purely synthetic is very new and may never work.
I think it's interesting if you're people asking about the value of synthetic data if the reliability is compromised, because the reliability of non-synthetic data is compromised.
I think that is
Data
actually the
quality
biggest
is a
plus.
major challenge
Yes, I think the biggest advantage that somebody has handed the synthetic data people is the enormous problems with panel data. And the MRS, SMR, Insights Association, etc., are doing fantastic work with the Global Data Quality Initiative, but we don't know whether it will be successful. Let's hope it will be. But the validity is being compromised. I think with synthetic data, there are things you can do to have a look at it to see, is it likely to be reliable in your industry for these purposes when we're talking augmented data.
Exactly.
Okay, I think we're getting pretty much close. There is an interesting question about how does Google Gemini compare with sort of ChatGPT and Copilot? I don't know because I haven't used Gemini for a few weeks. And I run a course on Copilot and I reran it yesterday, having previously run it 6 weeks ago. So I did my updates and several things had changed. So you could easily find that the best one today was ChatGPT and the second best was Copilot and the next best was Claude and the next best was Gemini. And then in January, Gemini could be best. It is changing at that sort of speed at the moment.
Exactly. You have to be constantly checking everything out all of the time to be able to understand. And in a way, it's almost kind of irrelevant which one, because it's just going to change so often. And also sometimes you suit something better for the purposes that you have. So, each one is going to appeal to you in a different way at a different point in time. So it's almost like we can't say, oh, I recommend this because I might recommend something else next week.
Yeah, at the moment, I would recommend being flexible and
Exactly.
different
Being as open as possible. Lol.
which is why the Boston Consulting Group have come up with this 10-20-70, where the actual algorithm is the smallest component of the three things. And data is having good data is twice as important as having a good algorithm. And having the right people doing the right things is 7 times as important as the algorithm. Now, whether those numbers are exactly right, who knows? But I think it's a good way of thinking about the problem, that 10-20-70.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you so much, Lucy. Thank you for
Pleasure.
everybody for the questions.